Howdy.
Howdy.
I'm Gregory Gauze, Professor of International Affairs and the John H. Lindsay Class of 44 Chair at the Bush School. For 8 years, I was head of the Department of International Affairs down at the mothership in College Station. And in January, I moved here to work at the Bush School's Washington, D.C. teaching site. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our little slice of Aggie land here in the nation's capital. Our executive director, General Jay Silveria, asked me to convey his welcome and his best wishes to all of you. Make sure you come back when Jay is in town. He's a delightful person. You'll enjoy meeting him. I want to give a special welcome to a real Aggie who is in the audience, former Congressman Bill Flores, class of 1976. Congressman Flores represented College Station and the university in Congress from 2011 to 2021. Also want to welcome his wife, Gina, who has also joined us, and thank them for being here tonight. And I also want to welcome the staff from the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation who have joined us tonight. The Diana Davis Spencer Foundation is the major donor to the Bush School's Washington, D.C. teaching site, and without them, we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
The Bank of America set up the endowment for the program on volunteerism just about 25 years ago when the school was founded. This is the 21st event in the series the bank was generous enough to establish. In the recent past, the program has honored individuals and institutions who play a central role in volunteerism in our region. And by our region, I mean the Brazos Valley, in our state, by which I mean Texas, and in our nation. The institutions and folks honored include the Houston Livestock and Rodeo, which does so much in Houston, in the Houston area. The Honorable Margaret Spellings, former Secretary of Education, Dr. Ruth Simmons, President of Prairie View A&M University, former President of Brown University, Larry James, the CEO of City Square in Dallas, Judy Verendenberg, the President and CEO of Girls Incorporated, and many other leaders in the field. And you are in for a similar level of quality tonight. It's my pleasure to invite to the microphone Mr. Derek N. Perkins, Senior Vice President of the Bank of America, to kick off tonight's event. Perkins.
I'm going to try this. Howdy. So I had to do it because I got an email. I think it was yesterday when it started off with howdy. So I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I have to do that. Good afternoon. I'm Derek Perkins. I'm the market executive here for Bank of America, covering the greater Washington region, which covers Maryland, parts of Maryland, all of DC, and parts of Northern Virginia. But we're excited to have you all here today. I heard this is the first out of Aggie land. And so hopefully DC is treating you well. We're thrilled to have the A&M school here in our market, and we look forward to doing things with you more going forward. I just want to highlight just a couple quick things, just because it seems to be timely. Yesterday we had our first quarter town hall with Brian Moynihan, and he mentioned that in 2022, Bank of America employees volunteered over 2 million hours. Right, because in this sort of speaks to that commitment to sort of selflessness and sort of ensuring that you're really being active in the communities in which we are operating. In DC, we had over 20,000 hours provided by 2,300 associates. We're really, really proud about that and really looking forward to, again, to that driving that volunteerism. It's something that is really important. I'm excited that you guys are here today. I'm excited about the panel. And I would like to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues who are in the room. I will call their names, but I haven't seen them all yet. So if you're a Bank of America employee, you can please just stand or raise your hand.
All right.
Again, thank you all. This is exciting. This is exciting. And what I did not get was how do you leave something? Like I said, howdy to come. What do I do when I'm leaving? Just bye. Is that
Bye, y'all.
just howdy again? And then look, because you guys are from Texas, and I know we don't have Texas barbecue in DC, but if you're looking for a place and you're new to town, there's a place called Hill Country, which people love. So again, I'm not saying it's better than Texas brisket or anything like that. I don't want that trouble.
Texas, yeah.
Hill Country.
Texas
Thank you,
out of
and
Austin.
again, unfortunately, today.
Thank you, Derek. It's a pleasure to be able to be here in DC. I'm Will Brown. I'm a professor at the Bush School of Government Public Service and also serve as the director for the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. It's a special privilege to be able to bring this program on volunteerism here to the DC campus, especially to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the school. And greetings and thanks again for being here. It's an honor to, let me give you just a little bit. Sorry, I got my notes mixed up. But I do want to say just a little bit about some of the folks that helped put on the event this evening. So the folks from the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy have put in quite a bit of work. We've got our own special Dr. Kenny Traylor, who's sitting back there in the corner watching you all. So he's keeping track of us. Kenny's been my right-hand man to be able to help make the center come into fruition. Denise Parker, who you see working everywhere. So Denise is running around. She's outside working some more. So she is too, has been at our side and been instrumental in putting the heart really into what the center is and what this program is and in all that it can be. Nicole Collier and Alyssa Duaney are also here from the center. So if you got questions about who we are and what we do and what are we doing in DC, we'd love to be able to chat with you because we'll have an opportunity to visit some more. So just a quick acknowledgement to the staff. Community engagement, this idea of volunteerism is a core principle of the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. We recognize that participation from everybody in our society is critical for a vibrant civil society and a vibrant and healthy community. We find our own ways to connect. Societies continue to shift in the ways that we think about engagement. Volunteerism is right. And we look at some of the national trends and some of the data that we see, right? So is volunteerism going down? What does it mean? How do we think about volunteerism as we go forward in the next 50 years, even in reference to how are we going to be able to frame this? And so this panel begins to sort of acknowledge some of that work that's been done. Nonprofits need to consider how best to be able to engage. And so this program has been instrumental in being able to move that forward. Volunteerism contributes to our sense of self-esteem and our sense of empowerment in our communities. Volunteerism is about one's ability to be able to engage and connect with the people around us and the social relationships that brings. We know that builds our communities and makes them stronger. And a core principle of President Bush's founding ideas was sort of established by these folks that they represent here tonight, these legacy organizations, and a core principle I always love 41's quote in this recognition of just get off the bench and get out there and do something. And this is a fundamental aspect. And so these organizations have been carrying forward that work and that responsibility for quite some time. So I'm honored to be able to introduce the panel. I'm going to introduce them real briefly. You can see the full bios of these individuals in the program, so it's not necessary to read through all of that. We've got Tom Collimore here, the senior advisor to the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, representing the foundation in DC, and to further President and Mrs. Bush's legacy of service. Numerous roles within the president's administration and across a variety of public and private roles with an impressive career and of accomplishments. Warren Finch served as the former director of the George H.W. Presidential Library and Museum, and Warren was instrumental in getting the library and museum established in College Station. Diane Quest is the interim president and CEO of the Points of Light Foundation and served as an executive leader in the organization since 2016. Diane brings 20 plus years of experience in management, strategy, and external relations, including marketing and communications. British Robertson, who we identified as coming today, isn't able to join us today, but she's been gracious enough to be able to send Claire Bonsignori,
Great.
Bonsignori, who's Vice President of Development, has graciously agreed to step in, and there is a bio of Grace and Claire in the program as well. And I'm honored to be able to turn it over to Dr. Frank Ashley, who serves as the Executive Associate Dean and Senior Professor at the Bush School. In over 40 years in education, Dr. Ashley has served in a variety of roles, including teaching, coach, and administrator. And apparently he's thinking about retiring, but we've yet to see whether that's indeed going to be true or not. So, Frank, I turn it over to you. You are in good hands, I promise.
He's an Alabama guy. I don't know. Here we go.
Break it.
Howdy. That's what I like right there. Okay, let me dispel the rumor first. we will not be doing a demonstrational ballroom dance. after this. I know some of you are, Diane, I know you're a little
That's what I
heartbroken.
showed up for.
I know, that's the reason you're here. But we might do a little cha-cha meringue
Okay.
a little bit later. We'll talk about that later.
It'd be helpful.
Thanks everyone for being here. I've gone over the ground rules with this group. I told them that I won't follow any of them, so y'all ready? Everyone's seen your bio, but let's start with you, Warren. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I started with the National Archives about 34 years ago, and I just retired in December. So got a graduate degree from Auburn University in history. And my wife was working for soon-to-be wife was working for the archives already, and basically takes credit for giving me the job.
Nepotism.
Nepotism. So I'm so glad that she helped me get the job that 2 or 3 years later decided to marry her. So, but anyway, so I started a career at the National Archives as a technician, a GS 3 or 4, and really fell in love with the job because it was something I got to do. I had a history degree. This is about history every day. And the Reagan Library was just opening up in California. We were still in a temporary site. I went from being a GS4 to an archivist in about 6 months because just the way things fell. So I worked out at the Reagan Library for about a year. And then my wife was working, soon-to-be wife was working at the National Archives, and we thought we should probably live in the same city if we were going to get married. So moved back to DC and worked here about 3 or 4 years. And then President Bush lost the election. It was clear beginning about June or July that things didn't look good. But as the archives, we couldn't go into the White House and start boxing up records until after he'd actually lost. So I was part of a team in November, about 2 or 3 days after the election, that went into the EOB in the White House and started boxing up records. And it was, in many ways, it was like measuring the body for the casket. It was like the undertaking, because we actually went in and would open file drawers with tape measures, and because we knew how many inches of records we put in a box. So I did that, and then they need somebody to come to College Station. So I was the first employee in College Station to get the building ready. We're in an old bowling alley, which is great because bowling alleys don't have those. They don't have piers. So I was the guy that got there about a month before the records and made sure the building was shelved and ready. And then 3 or 4 years later, we were just celebrating our 25th anniversary. Was an archivist, supervisory archivist. And I had this great guy who was director. His name was Doug Menarchik. And he was a great mentor. I've had great mentors throughout my career, as sure everyone does. And when he left, I'd been his deputy, and he recommended me for the job. And they called in 2004 and said, "We need an archivist. Who do you think should do it?" And I said, "Oh, I can work with anybody you get. I'm that kind of guy." And they said, "Well, we're thinking about nominating you to be the new archivist of the United States." So Doug Menarchik's last day was December 25th. My first day was December 26th. So, and from 2004 until I retired December 3rd, 2022, I was the archivist. Great. I was very lucky. We had the best president and first lady. They were a dream. And their staff was a dream. So I will tell you, not every other former president's staff is a dream, but the Bushes were. They were not demanding at all. And if they wanted you to do something, you couldn't do it, you explained it to them, and they were like, "I understand." Never forced any employees on us. We did it the way we thought was best, and the museum and everything. And they were great to work with. They were in College Station all the time, at least once a month, maybe more. And would come by the library and museum and do programs. And I won't do it now, but we're going to talk about volunteerism.
If we ever get around to that.
Yeah. Anyway, so they were great examples. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. They were great examples, and they were role models for volunteerism. So thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
So just a little bit about my history, because it influences why why I got into nonprofit and why I do this work. My family is a military family. My dad was in the Navy. My uncle was in the Navy. My other uncle was in the Coast Guard Reserves. I have an uncle who's a paramedic, an aunt who works in school. So public service, my mom's retired civil servant from the VA, is just in my blood. It's how I grew up. And my first career was as a journalist, which I also believe in many forms is also a form of public service. Debatable with some outlets these days. But when I decided to leave that industry, I came here to Washington, D.C. to go to grad school and get a degree in political science, and worked very briefly at the State Department thinking, oh, I'm going to go into civil service just like my family. It moves really slow. And I didn't last very long, just a couple of years at State, and moved into nonprofit from there. I grew up with my parents taking me to volunteer opportunities. It's just something that's inherent in everything that I do. And working in the nonprofit sector, you really see the power and the influence and the delivery and the critical need for people to volunteer their time, to donate, to be involved and be a voice for causes that they care about. So I started at Points of Light in 2016, have been a part of the team through a lot of changes. We were an organization started in the White House with the Daily Point of Light Award that President Bush was the first to recognize everyday Americans from the White House with an award that he signed until he passed. So we protect and hold that program sacred. It's at the core of what we do. But we also started to look at what does the world need from Points of Light, and volunteering is absolutely critical. But people bring a lot of unique assets and talents to the table and resources that nonprofits need. So we have expanded our strategy. It still falls within our mission to inspire, equip, and mobilize people to take action. But that means any civic engagement action. So if you don't have time right now at this point in your life to volunteer, maybe you can donate. Maybe you can buy from businesses that support the same purpose or have the same values that you have. Maybe you can be purposeful at work. So there's a number of different ways that we look at civic engagement around what we call the civic circle, and carry on this legacy of President Bush's to get individuals involved, to work with companies that get their employees involved and engaged in important issues, and then to support the nonprofit sector in harnessing the power of individuals to support their causes.
Thank you. Tom.
Well, I don't want to get in Diane's lane, but I want to just say a quick word. I think when you think about President Bush's well-known quote about there being, no definition of a complete life without a big element of service to others, Frank, that's you. I mean, 40 years as a quintessential educator, as a pillar in your community, as a leader in your church, you've done it all, and they knew you well. They'd be so proud of where you are now. And I just have to say that before I say, so glad to be here with you as you're winding it up at A&M. And I know the next chapter will be just as exciting, but thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I'll give you $20 later on.
He's a point of light.
He is a bright point of light.
Well, I'm now representing the George and Barbara Bush Foundation here in town, as was mentioned. I had the great honor of having one of those moments as a young kid that changed the direction of my life, which was I met President Bush in 1978 when he came to campaign for the guy I was working for, running for statewide office. And a year later, I was working on his campaign for president. And as we were joking before this event, as our friend Gene Becker says, Bush World's a little bit like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never check out. So ever since then, in one way or another, the Bushes and now their legacy organizations have been a central part of my life. And when you're lucky to have a mentor like that, someone to learn from, and we're here talking about service and volunteerism, and he was the gold standard. He really was. And it was really because of the way I think he approached his life on a day-to-day basis. he was always concerned about the other guy. You know, people have written about how he learned this from his mother, who said, you know, don't brag about yourself. And, but he lived that way. And he was the master of the small gesture and the master of the big idea. And he was, I remember when he was preparing for the convention speech in 1988, one of the biggest moments of his political life. He was typing out, he always typed them himself on an old typewriter. Amazing to think of that today. But he'd type these notes out and he'd have me give them to Peggy Noonan, who was the speechwriter who was helping him with the speech for the convention. And one of his notes was, I want to talk about people who are points of light in their communities. And it was always a central force for him. Doing good by others, putting yourself in other people's shoes and making a meaningful difference in other people's lives. And so that's just stuck with me throughout my career, and whether it was politics, government, private sector, association work. I salute the Bank of America people. You know, these corporate programs are terrific. They make a real difference in our communities. I had the honor of leading a Fortune 10 charitable giving program for a number of years. And, you know, the work you do is very, very important. So anyway, I don't know what your question was. I've been babbling on, but
Good job. That's a great
I'll
job.
move on. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Claire?
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I'm the Vice President of Development for the Barbara Bush Foundation, and I also am the daughter of 2 public servants, so it was in my blood. I fell into the nonprofit space, though, a bit by accident, you know, relatively soon after school, and then just found myself feeling how incredibly fortunate I was that I was able to earn a living and use my professional energy in a way directed at helping others in service to my community. And that community has meant many different things over the course of almost 20 years. But most recently, I found myself drawn to the Barbara Bush Foundation. So I'm the newest to the Bush family legacy organizations here, but very, very fortunate to be so. And I was drawn by Barbara Bush herself, not personally, but by her legacy. And I've always admired her. I've always admired how selflessly she operated as a servant, both, you know, to family, to community, to country. And really inspired by that. Now that lives on in her daughter, Dora Bush-Cook, who is the honorary chair of our foundation, and our CEO, British Robinson, who should be with you all tonight. And I actually met British for the first time in a volunteer capacity as well when she was volunteering for an international refugee organization where I used to work. And so I was drawn by the scope of the literacy challenge, which I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to touch on later, but also just how pervasive it is in our society and how many Americans it's going to take working together, mostly as volunteers, to do something about it. So here I am a few years later and really honored to be here.
Thanks, Kai. Hey, Claire, you and Tom sort of hit on something, and I want to just throw this out there, everyone. But how are you affected by the example of President and Mrs. Bush and volunteerism? I mean, both of you guys sort of hit on that, but you 2 guys.
Well, so at the museum, we forgot one of Mrs. Bush's block schedules. And Ms. Bush wanted to do something. She told her staff, "You want to do something every day to help somebody else." So there's a block schedule and you go, my goodness, how can someone do this much? But they were both, and you know, they both did stuff that no one ever heard about. You know, Gene Becker talks about President Bush going to Grand Isle, I think it was Grand Isle, Louisiana, to give $1 million to an ER clinic, and he somehow got the star of ER. His name is George Clooney to go organ. But then Gene Becker asked George Clooney, "Why'd you come?" And he said, well, everybody was going to New Orleans. Nobody knew that President Bush, nobody's ever going to find out he's going to Grand Isle, Louisiana. There's no press here. But that's the kind of stuff, I mean, that's the example. My father used to always say that if people found out the good things you were doing, you didn't get credit for it. And President and Mrs. Bush did so much that people never, you know, reading to children at the hospital in Maine. So they were the example. And you try to emulate that. You try to reach their example, but you can't because they were the gold standard of volunteerism.
Diane?
I think for me, the point in time, and this was a couple years into being at Points of Light, where this, you hear all of these stories. I've heard the George Clooney story and countless others about the kindness and empathy and genuineness of President and Mrs. Bush. And I met them a couple of times and felt that as well. And I would say really the entire family, that they are the living legacy. But it was at President Bush's funeral where, this is a man who was shot down in World War II, who led the CIA, who is responsible for, the fall of communism. So many great political, very important achievements as a public servant and a politician and elected official. The thing that rose up, though, through almost every obituary was this notion of points of light. So it's the idea that any meaningful life has to include service to others that really stuck with everyone across the board, no matter where they came from, what aspect of his life that they were representing. It was a moment in time where you kept hearing the theme of points of light and the value of people doing things in community, someone raising their hand to say, I can help. That really just drove home and solidified that it is, in my opinion, and I am at Points of Light, it rises to the top of his legacy and the things that he leaves behind for us as a society in the US and in other countries now, where we see where there wasn't traditionally a culture of volunteerism or service, we see that starting to take action or starting to take flight, and people getting involved because they see the difference they can make. That was something that he set in motion in the late 80s as he rose into the presidency.
Tom?
I just wanted to add a little note about the political side of it, because I think this gets missed sometimes. And the school had a great program last night with one of the president's former personal aides talking about what he learned working for President Bush. But, politics to George Bush, unlike a lot of what you see in today's society, was not the thing. I mean, it was what you had to do in order to gain office and then have the privilege to serve. But it wasn't politics for politics' sake. And he truly, and I saw it in action many times, I mean, he would look at an issue and say, well, what's the right thing to do? And there'd be advisors saying, oh my God, you got this constituency and these people. And he'd hear it all, but he also operated in a different galaxy when it came to that sort of decision making. And, there are lots of examples. The budget deal is the biggest one, but there are lots of examples of how he made lots of decisions with the idea of what's the best thing for the country? What's the best thing for the citizens I'm serving? Not what's going to help get me reelected. And, that's a pretty cool way to go about life. Mm-hmm. And I just want to mention that.
We talk about volunteerism as a way to increase civic engagement. So how do you think volunteering contributes to civic engagement and teaches the principles of being a responsible citizen? Anyone?
Well, there was a congressman who one time told me a story. He says, I'm a Democratic congressman. My colleague in the Cub Scouts, dad, is a Republican congressman. And he said, we had all these boys and we were both leading this Cub Scout troop. And he said, it was having worked with these boys and the boys, he said, it was pretty hard to go on the Senate floor. Call my Republican colleague an SOB when so they were engaged civically, and you get to, it doesn't happen so much in Washington, D.C. as it used to, because everyone flies home. But in the old days, you didn't fly home. You stayed here. You bought a house here. You were engaged civically in town. So we've missed some of that, but you get to know people. You get to, when you're civically engaged and in volunteer organizations, you get to feel empathy with them. You see their point of view. And probably there's not enough of that in America right now.
Get your uniform dirty.
What else?
Yeah, I would, our board chair, Neil Bush, often used to say at our conference, Service Unites, it was a theme of ours for a long time. And he would say, when you come to volunteer and serve together, you leave your differences at the door. And then one year he said, I want to change that. We actually bring our differences in with us, and then we engage with each other and we see that we're not either not that different, or we bring different perspectives that actually help us solve the problem. So it's both. It helps leave things behind so that you just see another human for another human and you're there serving the same purpose, or you see what the differences are and that it's not that bad. It's not, the other is not that bad. We can actually get along and work towards the same goals.
Correct. Claire?
Yeah, and if I might, I want to go a little bit back to literacy, which is what drives us, and connect a dot there, because I think that is an issue of civic engagement as well. And we use volunteerism, sort of as a way to drive change there. But just to give you a sense of the scope and why I'm talking about this, many of you probably already know, or may already know, that 130 million American adults currently lack proficiency in literacy, reading below what's the equivalent of a 6th grade level. So that's a shocking statistic. It is a correct statistic. I told everybody here that I often get them wrong. That one is right. 130 million Americans, it's 54% of US adults read below the equivalent of a 6th grade level. Wow. So that prevents these people from fully participating in society, as parents, as workers in the workforce, as community members, as civic engagement as well. We commissioned a study with Gallup that found that the US is losing up to 10% of GDP, or $2.2 trillion a year, due to low literacy. So, as well as volunteering, literacy is a civic issue. And Mrs. Bush recognized that when, before she was First Lady, but as First Lady when she founded this foundation. And she said then, literacy is everybody's business, period. If we're going to solve this, it has to be everybody's business. And she said something else, and I'm going to read it because otherwise I'll definitely get it wrong. And it was actually on the screens outside, which was very helpful. But she said, some people give time, some money, some their skills and connections, some literally give their life's blood, but everyone has something to give. And I think she just recognized right away that everybody was going to have to give something, whatever that was, if we're going to change these really pervasive issues. So I'm raising all this about literacy because we look to volunteering as a way to tackle this civic issue as well. And our longest standing program is now called Read Squad. It was called Teen Trendsetters when she knew it and when Governor Jeb Bush helped to start it. But it is based on volunteering. It's a one-to-one relationship between a teenager and a student in 1st or 3rd grade who's struggling with reading. And it works. And it works because of that relationship, the volunteer relationship. The students in that program in Florida, that's the best study we have right now, are advancing at a rate of 3 times their peers. And it's because of that volunteer. It's not because the books are better. It's because of that relationship. And we have data that shows how impactful that experience is on both sides of the table, and not just for reading, but for life skills, for leadership, for so many other things. So I really think about this question as it intersects directly with what we do and how we can really change one of the biggest crises that's facing us right now.
One thing, Frank, I would just mention in this whole vein, though, is for our younger people, I'm, now parenting 4.
Like me.
Yeah.
People like me.
I got 4 young adults now, but they were teenagers and now they're young adults. But so much has changed with technology. I think that we do have to find a way to get back to basics and communicate the importance of this volunteerism. And, one of my soapbox issues with younger people when I talk to groups now is, okay, how many hours a week do you spend on your phone? Okay, and Apple helps you. They tell you. It's amazing. All right, well, just can you do 3 hours less on your phone a week and volunteer somewhere? It's not really asking a lot when you think about it. See, there you go.
And now you can even volunteer on your phone.
Well, there you go.
Claire, I want you to know that I've had the exact same license plate on my truck for the past 27 years. I have personalized plates that say "Read to Succeed"
I love it.
for 27 years, the same plates. So,
That's great.
okay. In your experience, do people engage as consistently as they once did as far as volunteers?
Well, that's a good question. So I retired. So,
But I know what you do now.
Yeah.
Everyone else doesn't know what you do.
so I volunteer a lot, and I worked in an office of about 30 people, and so I was engaged with the staff every day. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So now I volunteer, and I find it very fulfilling because I engage people. They don't have to like me, but I'm there. My parents. It's a good question. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I'm betting that it's not as bad as we think it is. That we're so pessimistic about everything right now. I'm guessing that maybe the statistics are not as bad, and that people do engage. I'm in the Knights of Columbus. There are a lot of young people in the Knights of Columbus. It's actually one of those things that President Bush talked about in that address before the convention, about one of those points of lights was the Knights of Columbus. I do see a lot of, in the organizations that I volunteer in, I do see a lot of younger people now joining. So yes, kids do spend a lot of time on their phones. And maybe it's because I'm around a lot of smart kids at Texas A&M, but there are a lot of students out there, a lot of kids that, and a lot of Texas A&M kids, and at the Bush School here and in College Station, those students are actively, and involved in volunteering. They're a bunch of do-gooders, sometimes to the detriment of their career and the salaries they're going to make in the future. They're taking jobs because they are such do-gooders and such volunteers are taking salaries that maybe they could work someplace else. So I'm actually an optimist as far as youth. I do think that students and younger people are actively engaged.
We see that. Points of Light has done research over the last several years, and Gen Z is by far the most engaged. They want, first of all, they don't want to accept the world the way that we're leaving it for them. They want a better place. And so the consistency is in volunteering, but also in listening and learning about new issues, using their voice, donating when they're financially able to. And even during the pandemic, when we did one of our surveys, someone who had volunteered recently, I think within the last 30 days, 54% of those who had said, yes, I will volunteer again. So over half were committed to going back. And I think it speaks to the reason why you're volunteering is because it's inherently a social activity. The number one way people get involved in volunteering is because someone asks them to join them. So as long as people are still searching for social connection, I think we will continue to see volunteering. We do know that the numbers are going down. AmeriCorps released their data a couple of months ago, and it's dropped by 7%, the number of people. It was taken over the time period of the pandemic, but we need to make sure that we're still having conversations like this and talking about the importance of volunteering, calling people to action, whether it's through our channels and our work or by inviting our friends to go with us when we're doing those volunteer activities.
You sort of hit on what we can do. Anyone else have any ideas as far as what we can do to maybe encourage more people to volunteer?
Well, I'll add one specific that we have really tried to look at ways that we can engage volunteers virtually. And the pandemic was certainly a forcing function there. But we do engage in both reading mentorship programs and also digital literacy for adults in workforce type programs, virtual volunteers who can complete a lot of this work virtually. And that has really opened up our access to a really diverse group of volunteers from all different industries, sectors, communities, states, you name it. And it really alleviates, just like with learners, frankly, a lot of the barriers to participation. You don't have to be at a certain place on a certain day at a certain time to do this thing. You just have to be willing to help us out.
I'm not a big fan of mandates, but I am a big fan of school programs that involve service hours. And because I think developing good habits at a young age across the spectrum of things is so important, and it can become infectious, and you have to make it fun. I mean, the Bank of America, when you send your folks out for their free day of service, you make it fun, don't you? You make them t-shirts and you give them lunch and all that, right? I mean, you got to put a little bit of work into that. We do that. All of these groups do a day of service with their employees. We try to do it around the same time in June, around the President and Mrs. Bush's birthdays. To set a good example, number one, but we make it fun. And it's good. It's a good thing.
It is.
You know, we say volunteerism is a way to build community and social capital. And Claire, you sort of mentioned about how you are creating diverse audiences. So can you share how you engage diverse audiences in volunteerism and create community among your volunteers?
Sure. Well, in our mentorship programs, we try as much as possible to have our student mentees and our mentors reflect the same communities, be from the same communities, to have as many similarities as possible. The research shows that that's the most effective way. It also helps. I was alluding to some of the soft skills that are picked up in these programs. I think we see for sure that when a mentor sees somebody who looks like them on the other side of the table, they start to see themselves at the other side of the table. And it then becomes a perpetuating good cycle instead of the bad cycle of low literacy we're trying to combat. So in that way, we do try to be really reflective of the communities we're in, and we're in a number of states, a number of settings. So that's certainly true. As we have really double clicked on workforce development as a main strategy point of the foundation, that has opened up a number of new industries to us. And that's really helped to open up a diverse volunteer stream. Corporate volunteers, or also volunteers, even the majority of people who work in adult literacy centers or programs are volunteers. So working in workforce development programs has opened up a number of different industries and therefore a much more diverse volunteer pool for us.
I would say for us, we're so fortunate, and I alluded to this earlier, that we've seen this culture of service and volunteering really sort of ignite in countries and places where it may not have always been the case. We have affiliates in 39 countries and across the US, and they cover a diverse range of geographies and cultures and backgrounds, and they inform our work. We just had a global gathering with our affiliates in Brazil in March, and we had 40 affiliates represented, I think 80 people. And our Hong Kong affiliate sent 4 individuals. They traveled for 40 hours to be together with other groups that are doing this same work in their country to learn from each other. And so really that networking is how we make sure that any programming that we're doing, whether it's convening our conference, which we do every year, or developing programs with companies, with nonprofits, are informed by those diverse perspectives. And I would say the same for the Daily Point of Light honorees. We are over 7,000, I think over 7,500 at this point, going all the way back to 1990. And they are from 18 to 80 years old. They're from every part and pocket of this amazing country. And they just represent an incredible diversity of issues and areas and things that they care about. So we have a lot of inputs on how we're informed with different perspectives to carry out our work.
Okay, I got one more question before I open it up to the group right here. Okay. What is your proudest moment or point of pride regarding your work? And I'm gonna, whoever wants to go first can go. What's your proudest moment or point of pride regarding your work?
Well, it doesn't have to be volunteerism. It can be.
Regarding your work. I see Clara wants to go though.
Claire, you go.
Let it go.
Okay, well, I've got an easy one, and I'm on the development side of the foundation. So not that long ago, I was working on a report for a grant that we had received for one of the mentorship programs, and I got the report back from the programs team. Great work, all good. And I just went back and I said, do you have any pictures or stories? Because I'm giving a lot of facts and figures, and there's not that much that tells the human side of the story. So I said, okay, we'll go back. Well, they came back with a story from the parent of one of the students who had been in the program. And we see all this in statistics, a lot, but the mother basically described the child's journey through low literacy and struggling with literacy as a student, and the shame and stigma that goes along with that, and how embarrassing that can be to not be on par with your peers and your friends and your classmates, and to be falling behind. And the experience working with the high schooler in that case, how fun they made reading and how they made them feel like they were just, really special and smart, and nobody had been able to give them that kind of dedicated time and attention and really work with them. And when that kid got up to reading level, just the pride that they felt and the pride the parents felt, because the parents really cared and were not equipped to do that themselves. And so writing that into the story, just thinking that, because of some grant that somebody wrote, some kid's life has really changed. And the trajectory of that whole family is different, that kid went from struggling to now on par with classmates. There's all this data around, what grade level reading does for your future academic success in your career. That whole family is now different because that happened. And that, that's the kind of thing that it makes us proud every day.
Thanks, Claire.
I mean, for me, I've had some I'm a lucky guy. I've had some amazing jobs and opportunities. As a result of that, I've had an awful lot of people that worked for me over the years. And to me, I think what I take the most pride in is seeing folks who were interns or staff assistants or, had relatively junior jobs now running organizations and accomplishing good things. And hopefully who are doing that, the values that I tried to teach people coming along, I stole all of them from the Bushes. Okay. So, and I think it stuck with a bunch of folks, and that gives me a lot of pride. See them succeed and to be now mentoring their own stable of folks who are going to go out there and do good. So I'd say that.
So in 2017, Hurricane Harvey tore through the Gulf Coast, and President Bush did what he does and said, we're going to have a concert in College Station. It's like in 2 days, and all of these amazing country music. Well, country.
And when she says it was in 2 days, she's not kidding.
Yes.
Lady Gaga.
And Lady Gaga.
Country music, Lady Gaga. I mean, it was incredible. And Jean Becker said, we want all of our legacy organizations to be represented in this work. You're all involved, but we don't know how this is going to play out. And all 5 presidents have confirmed that they're going to be there. And now I don't know what I'm going to do with 5 presidents. They're all going to want to talk. We don't have time for them all the time. So she was stressed. And I said, what if we, because, we know a lot of our affiliates are involved. They're organizing spontaneous volunteers. What if we did 5 Daily Point of Light awards, and each president just did the award, and so they don't really have to say anything? And she said, I like it. It might work. Let me see. And she called us back a couple of days later, and she said, they bought it. They all said, yes, we're going to do this.
Really?
So we had 5 people who had abandoned whatever was happening in their daily lives, and they were responding to, rescuing people from homes, mucking out, what's the phrase? I'm forgetting the disaster phrase, cleaning out people's homes. There was a woman who was a wedding planner, and the couple who she was going to marry, they organized their wedding party. And instead of getting married, they responded to this crisis. So we had 5 people, everyday people, on stage with 5 former living presidents in front of a nationally televised audience receive our award. And it was incredible. And to be able to help Jean Becker solve for a problem that she had is also an incredible moment.
Okay, I've had a chance to think. So,
Which is scary.
yeah, it is. So we have a work study program at the Bush Library, and so we have this partnership with Texas A&M where they pay 3/4 the salary for the students. We pay a quarter. And we hire all these students. And a lot of them are first-time universities. It's their first person in their family to go to college. I had a young lady working at the front desk. She was an emancipated minor. Her home situation was so bad that she got emancipated when she was 16 years old and grew up at a friend's house. She was a work study student for us. She went on and got a medical degree from Texas A&M and became a doctor. A couple of years ago, we had three young ladies who were all from Somalia. They were all working at the library work study. Those young ladies all graduated. We've seen so many of these students over the years because we provided an opportunity and an environment. They've gone on and done great stuff, and we've been able to keep up with them. There's one kid, Roberto. He's graduated from Texas A&M. He couldn't afford an Aggie ring. Our volunteers that work in the museum pitched together and bought him his Aggie ring. But I take I guess my biggest fulfillment in the job was seeing my staff achieve, but also seeing these students that come to Texas A&M, many of them from the Valley or from other parts of Texas that you know are unlike College Station, and they come and work for the Bush Library for 2 or 3 years, and they all have this Texas A&M ethos, and they go on to do great things, and it's nice for me to think that we had a small part. I'm going to go to a luncheon next week for 5 of these work study students that are leaving us, and that's fulfilling.
Fun time. Anyone in the audience? Like, we have microphone, we got 2 banners back there.
Hi, I'm Norma Anderson with the Bill Anderson Fund. I'd like to ask, what is the greatest challenge that you had to overcome in your work?
If this is being recorded, do I need to repeat that? Okay, I see one people saying this, one person. Okay. Don't confuse me. Greatest challenge we had to overcome.
There's no challenging work that we do.
We had President and Mrs. Bush as examples. Mrs. Bush came every year and did a program for us on literacy where, with President and Mrs. Bush, I don't know, there must have been some challenges along the way, but I can't think of one.
Oh, I'll give you one. So he liked to tinker with his speeches right before he'd give them. And this was back in the run-up to the 1988 campaign. We started using a teleprompter, which he hated, by the way, because it was very Reagan-like, and he wanted to be his own guy, which he was, but you know, he didn't want to appear scripted and all that. But he was trying to learn to use a teleprompter because in some cases it's necessary and helpful. I remember one time we landed in New Hampshire and he had a speech at some pancake breakfast thing. And it was in the community center, you know, there was a tight little building and all this. And he handed me the transcript of the speech as we're getting off the plane. He said, there's a few changes in there, but you know, just feed it into the teleprompter. Well, they were like, he rewrote the whole speech. And we're going from the plane to the place where he's giving the speech. And I get to the teleprompter operator who's behind this like little shaky blue curtain. And the president and the vice president was speaking, and he was about as far away as Dr. Ashley is. And I'm behind this little curtain and I'm whispering into this, you know, 18-year-old teleprompter operator. And we're literally editing the speech on the computer, and we're about 3 pages ahead of where he's reading.
Oh my gosh.
And the challenge was to keep editing and stay ahead of what he was reading. And we barely made it, but that was challenging and stressful, all of this. Not quite on point of this conference, but it was an interesting.
Anyone else? Okay, got a question in the back.
Imad Bibawi, I'm on the board of Points of Light. Thank you all for your comments. I come from a corporate world, and today they're trying to measure impact, and they're trying to measure things beyond profit that says we're a valuable company. How would you recommend companies address the volunteering hours? Like Bank of America mentioned 2 million hours. How does that fit into value? Because I think to your question about how do we encourage more, I think there has to be some impact value that's attributed to it.
It's, this would have been part of my answer to the challenge question. Because as you know, an organization that has to raise revenue, we're also asked this question about what is the impact that you're having. And what we can do is we can count volunteer hours through our affiliates, through the companies that we work with, through our daily point of light, et cetera. So we can count the numbers that we're mobilizing, those volunteer hours. We know the input and how important that is. And we see it when AmeriCorps comes out with numbers that says, oh, look, the number of volunteers has dropped, and everyone thinks, oh, no, that's not good. What do we do? And so there's a little bit of a debate around the value of mobilizing those numbers. We know it's there, and we know that when we see it drop and people get nervous about that drop. It's really difficult to measure the impact of that when our work in particular is so disparate through companies like KPMG, like Bank of America. We know that you all are doing great work, but how do we roll that up for Points of Light and value that at an impact level is very, very challenging. Not to say that it's not important, but I think there needs to be a healthy conversation around the fact that there is also an importance in mobilizing numbers, because without those numbers, many nonprofits could not deliver on their services and the impact that they are having with just paid staff. It just simply wouldn't happen. So I don't have an answer, Imad, to the question. It's something that we grapple with, but I think it's worth a conversation around the value of those mobilization numbers and knowing that there is good work. I think the important piece around the numbers, so that it's not just numbers, is how are you working within community to develop solutions that are community-led based on the challenges that they're facing, and not simply coming in and delivering hours that maybe aren't going to have a lasting impact in that community?
I think it's a great question. There's this societal expectation that companies are going to be responsible citizens and they're going to make a contribution, right? And so if the nonprofits can help the companies crack that code on how you translate what's happening into a reportable deal that makes that impact, then there's a little something in it for everybody, right? And it's really important issue.
Claire, looked like you wanted to say something. I could see you.
And it's a sort of answer, but I think a challenge we have is that too often the impact statements are just very basic statistics and numbers, and they don't do enough to tell the whole story. And we can report all day long on literacy levels and hours of books and pages turned, and that's the kind of impact statement that we often are asked for. But that's not at all the full story. And it's not actually the impact statement. The impact statement is that, this workforce program took somebody who was stocking the shelves and now they're running the inventory system. That's the impact, but that's not the data point. There's 360 pages that were turned, 4 literacy levels gained, but that's not the story. And that's not the impact. The impact is the change in that person's life or that community.
Yeah. Something earlier about trillions are lost because of literacy. The dollar quantification of that impact is what needs to be much more visible and visible for society, because it's huge.
That takes it from the personal level. This is our economy, our society. Thank you.
Okay. And after this, we'll have time for one more.
I just wanted to add a commentary. Erin Hogan, I'm with Bank of America, and I actually lead our philanthropic advising team. Actually, my colleague Chris is here tonight, so we're delighted to be here. And on your point about how do you quantify, we have some research that we've been doing. We've researched a lot of things actually, but employee retention, Bank of America saves a lot of money because of the volunteer hours. It's actually one of our key components in our human capital report. And so we're happy to share that. So if it's helpful, but that's a very measurable piece of impact for any corporation. I would also say that we do research on how much volunteering actually impacts giving. So we do some work with the Lilly School for Philanthropy at Indiana University. And we know that when a donor is volunteering, they tend to give 3 times as much to that nonprofit. And so there's some, and not by a little bit, by a lot, by about 10 times as much. And actually it went up significantly during COVID. And if you think about that, how that really factors into the not-for-profit sector, it's not really hyperbole to say just it's critical to have a healthy not-for-profit sector. The not-for-profit sector is the 3rd largest employer in this country and contributes 10% of our GDP. So if we were to be without that, we would be in some real trouble. So happy to send some more data points your way, but I really appreciate the commentary.
Okay. Who's got that last burning question? I do. If you could give one piece of advice to every other nonprofit, something that you've learned from all the work you've done, what would be that one piece of advice that you'd give to everyone?
I think it is the value of recognition, which is, something else that Points of Light does really well. It's a unique space for us. And it's something that the president understood when he started the Daily Point of Light Award, that no one is doing their volunteer service for that recognition, but the power of it in an unexpected way is phenomenal. It's what keeps people coming back. It's what has them invite their friend to come. We see that in our Daily Point of Light Award, in the work that we do with the President's Volunteer Service Award, the L'Oreal Women of Worth. There are a reason why all these large recognition programs exist. It's because there is a value in that kind of recognition. And for us to celebrate the things that we value, which is your time and your support of a particular cause, goes an extraordinarily long way. And it's at the end of a project, it's at the end of someone's time with the nonprofit, but it's critical not to forget it. It is the exclamation point at the end of that time they've spent with you.
And I agree. It is a recognition. It's for staff members, it's recognition, but for volunteers, it's also recognition. You guys named a Point of Light, Rebecca's Wish, and they're a College Station family, and in our community, because Rebecca's Wish was named a Daily Point of Light. That's just done great things in our community for that organization. I mean, you can't buy that kind of publicity that you can with just recognizing a young lady who's got a foundation for pancreatic issues, and it is recognition. And people need to be recognized for their work, and they also need to be recognized for their volunteer work. It goes a long way. It's satisfaction.
I'd say listen to your constituents, listen to the folks you're trying to serve. And don't think you have it all figured out. Be a little flexible on your plan as a result of listening.
Believe it or not, I was also going to say listen. But so I'll take a little pivot and say collaborate. Because just, really connected to that, I think, I've seen and we've seen that when we work together with like-minded organizations, people, partners, the impact just really expands. So listen and collaborate.
Thank you. How about we give our panel everyone on the panel but me has a little bag. That's right. Enjoy your swag right there. And Will, I call you up right next? Because I got to remind.
Well, you can close it right out.
Don't forget, we will have a reception outside, so you can maybe ask these guys some questions that you maybe didn't want to ask them out loud. But once again,
thank you guys so much, and thank you for the work that you're doing to keep the legacy of the Bushes going. Thank you guys.
And thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian.